Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere ancient, somewhere hot, somewhere where the scent of burned frankincense clings to your robe before you even open your eyes. You're lying on a reed mat in the back corner of a dim Assyrian caravanserai half stable, half shrine. The dirt beneath you is warm from the night fire, and the air smells like ash, sweat, and the dry sweetness of last night's spilled dates. But you don't move. Not yet. Because here, before sunrise, even looking the wrong way could mean trouble. Outside, someone is already grinding something in a stone bowl slow, circular, a rhythm older than writing. It's not food. It's a blend of ashes and powdered resin that gets burned each morning before anyone makes eye contact. You'll see why. Or not see, depending on how seriously you take the rules. See, you're in Nineveh, or just outside of it in a trading outpost near the Tigris, sometime around 700 BCE. And the man across from you, the one silently feeding the fire, he's been carrying saffron and cedarwood sap across desert routes for 30 years. He hasn't looked anyone in the eye since midnight, not even the mule. You rub the crust from your eyelids and catch the faintest glance of him, but he flinches. Don't. His shoulders hunch, and he shifts so you're only seeing his profile. The kind of sharp-nosed silhouette that belongs on a temple wall. He throws a pinch of ground resin into the flames. It flares gold, and the smoke rises like a veil between you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you listening from? Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far we travel together each night. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fire is called Lamasu breath, named after the winged guardians carved into palace gates. Frankincense, pine resin, and crushed thornbush mix into a smoke that supposedly keeps desert spirits out of your skull while your dreams are still leaking. The Assyrians believed that before sunrise, the soul hadn't quite glued itself back to the body yet, especially after sleep. Eyes were dangerous, then still wild, still unsealed. To stare into someone's face before the sun had touched their forehead, that was like poking a god before he'd had coffee. Even the animals here understand the rule. The camels, knotted up under wool blankets, avoid each other's eyes. The roosters crow sideways. One little donkey near the water trough keeps its gaze lowered like it's about to confess a war crime. You step outside barefoot and the sand is still cool, just barely. Stars overhead are sharp enough to draw blood. Off in the distance, a pile of date crates sits unopened. There's a single palm leaf cover over them, tied with blue string. No one's touched them because, again, it's not dawn yet. Why? Well, aside from the spiritual thing, there's also a trade issue. In the ancient Assyrian spice routes, deals couldn't be finalized until first light hit the parchment. That was the rule. You could talk, you could gesture, but no deal was valid until the two traders stood facing east and then exchanged glances. One Assyrian court tablet even records a case where a man was accused of stealing cumin under false dawn. The judge ruled in favor of the defendant, not because he wasn't guilty, but because the transaction had occurred before the rooster's third call. No eye contact, no trade, case dismissed. Now, historians still argue whether this pre-dawn ritual was purely religious, or whether it began as a clever legal workaround. Some think it was just a convenient way to delay price negotiations until both parties were fully awake. Others swear it tied into moon cults, or the way smoke rose differently depending on humidity before sunrise. What's certain is that if you're carrying sacks of dried ginger, you do not meet the gaze of a buyer before the amber edge of the sun touches the horizon. Until then, everything's just performance. The man beside you offers you a small bowl of black tea. It's warm, sweet, smoky. No words are exchanged. You nod once. He nods once. No eye contact. Still in the rules. Suddenly, there's a thud from a nearby alley. A crate dropped too early. A sharp intake of breath. A murmured curse. Someone's broken the rhythm. You turn your head but too fast. A young merchant from the city is standing there, his eyes locked accidentally with an old caravan guard. The guard blinks once, twice, then spits to the side. He doesn't say anything, but the message is clear. You just cursed your next 3 trades, son. Later, you'll hear that boy had a shipment of turmeric that all turned moldy within 2 days. Whether it was the weather or the early eye contact, No one will ever know. But he blames the sunrise glance. Fringe belief. Maybe, but let's be honest, you probably won't survive this if you try negotiating with 800 BCE Assyrians before breakfast and without the proper ritual. The world is still quiet. The horizon glows with the thinnest line of bronze. And soon, very soon, the IBAN will lift. Until then, keep your gaze low, your hands warm, and your heart somewhere between logic and legend. The bronze line on the horizon doesn't grow fast. It drips upward slow, syrupy, like the first breath from an incense burner. You stand barefoot, sand clinging to your heels, watching the traders begin their motion without ever truly looking. It's an odd ballet. Men moving through the courtyards of the caravanserai with perfect muscle memory, lifting sacks, feeding donkeys, shaking spice bags, all without locking eyes. A woman in a crimson scarf passes you carrying a tray of small brass cups. She offers one. You reach out. Again, no words, no stares. The smell of cardamom hits your nose first, and the heat of the brass cup seconds. You drink. It tastes like dry earth and burnt sugar. This exact moment is when the law of the unspoken gaze is strongest. You hear it muttered now, between two elders hunched over a ledger made of clay. May your dealings be sealed in shadow before light stirs the soul. And that's no metaphor. In old Assyrian trade law, pre-dawn contracts known as tablet shadows were considered non-binding unless specific invocations were used and no eye contact was made. Otherwise, void, or worse, considered bewitched. According to one archivist's wax tablet recovered near Tel Brak, an entire shipment of tamarind was once burned because the merchant who delivered it held the customer's eyes too long before the rooster's second cry. No one even checked if it was spoiled. It had been spiritually contaminated. So why the drama? Well, it goes deeper than ghost stories. You see, the Assyrians believed that between the final hour of night and the first breath of dawn, the desert's thin reality was prone to splitting open, briefly, just enough for spirits, dreams, and stray intentions to leak into the waking world. Looking someone in the eye during that time, that was like opening your front door and shouting, "Hey, nightmares, we're awake now." And the thing is, the belief worked, because belief was power here. And when a traitor believed that your eyes could pull lies from his tongue before he'd had a chance to bury them, that was real enough. Now, here's the funny part. That same rule about not making eye contact, it didn't apply to animals. Only humans. But just to be safe, most spice traders kept their faces hidden even from their camels. One fringe legend from Assur tells of a trader named Daramu who looked his camel in the eye before dawn and then couldn't get it to sit for 3 days. When he tried to sell the beast, it bit the buyer's ankle and spit in his spice pouch. Was it possession? Bad training? Historians still argue whether it was behavioral imprinting or something weirder. Either way, no one made direct eye contact after that, not even with the goats. And this brings us to a peculiar custom among the merchant class. Failure to follow the no-eye rule could serve as a legal defense. Let's say you were accused of underweighting your saffron bundles. If you could prove that the weighing was done before sunrise and that both parties had accidentally locked eyes, boom, case thrown out. The logic, the moment was spiritually unstable. No oath could be considered valid under the gaze curse. There's even a record from the city of Kar-Tukulti Ninurta of a trial where two men intentionally stared at each other during a deal to nullify it later, like ancient lawyers using eye contact as a shredder. You walk slowly now through the waking courtyard. The chickens have started to squabble. The frankincense fires are low. Everyone's body moves like a whisper. And yet, there's something powerful about this silence. A shared agreement, older than speech, older than writing. A pact between sand and soul that says, until the light touches the iris, we are strangers, not enemies. One elderly woman lifts a small brass triangle and strikes it once. The ping is high, cold, clear. The sound rolls across the courtyard like a priest's whisper. That's the signal. First light. The band will lift in 5 breaths. 4, 3. And then you catch someone's eyes. Just briefly, a man with black-dyed fingers, probably from cloves. He holds your gaze for a heartbeat. Nothing happens. No spirits pour out, no curses spill. But he tilts his head, just slightly, and says in a deep voice that makes the sand around you feel ancient, "Now, you may speak." Now that the spell has lifted, now that the first light has officially kissed the edge of the clay roofs, the world begins to hum with words. Quiet ones at first, nothing louder than a breath. You move through Nineveh's early markets, trailing behind the spice porters. Even the footsteps here seem soaked in history. The streets are packed clay, smoothed from centuries of sandals, and the walls are dark with soot and time. But it's the smell that guides you, not banners, not signs, not voices, just aroma. You follow the warm, buttery scent of sesame oil, the sharp sting of a black vinegar, the earthy sweetness of dried figs. That's how this place works. In the Assyrian world, scent was the morning's compass. Long before writing found its way onto clay, long before street stalls bore painted icons, traders knew where they were and who they trusted by scent alone. The clove district smelled like fire and citrus peel. The myrrh stalls, like wet bark and blood. The cumin porters, their hands reeked for weeks. And if you got lost, you sniffed. You followed. Because in the pre-dawn hours when no one could look you in the eye, it was your scent that told the story of who you were. One old proverb scratched into a ceramic cup reads, "A man may lie with his eyes and hands, but not with his scent." You pass under a reed canopy that leaks sunlight through its gaps, like spears of honey dripping from the sky. A boy sells cardamom seeds crushed into clay beads to wear around the neck. He claims they protect you from envy and camels. Honestly, the second one sounds more plausible. According to one fringe text from the archive at Nimrud, traders used to carry spice pouches under their tunics not only to sell, but to identify one another. If someone's personal scent changed too much from the previous week, say, from fenugreek to tamarind, that was considered suspicious. Changing your scent too fast, that could mean you were a spy. And yes, historians still debate whether this was an actual security measure or just a very judgmental olfactory culture. Still, you hear stories. A shipment once seized an Asher because the cinnamon it carried smelled unfamiliar. The excuse: it's from a different region. The response: so is betrayal. Of course, not every scent is welcome. One musty smell wafts through the alley and turns your stomach rancid linseed oil. You duck behind a cart. That smell belongs to Tagur, a famously underhanded broker known for mixing his saffron with dried dandelions. You watch as he tries to sell his pale powder to a skeptical woman with her arms crossed and her nose turned up. She doesn't even speak. She just pulls a scrap of real saffron from her sleeve and lets its scent prove the lie. He slinks off, eyes down. In the Assyrian spice trade, proof didn't always mean numbers. It often meant smell. Some market courts even had designated nose judges trained scent verifiers who could sniff out fraud like bloodhounds in silk robes. You spot one now, an old man in a navy tunic, standing by a cedar post, inhaling a jar of powdered cinnamon as if decoding a prophecy. The crowd watches in complete silence. He nods. The seller exhales. The deal goes through. If you're thinking this all sounds too dramatic to be real, remember, these traders were moving gold in powder form. A single misidentified spice could bankrupt a caravan, or worse, ignite a feud. There's even a famous Assyrian children's riddle that goes, "What has no feet, but walks into courts? What cannot lie, but ruins liars? What travels faster than truth?" The answer: smell. And just like that, it hits you. Maybe this whole no eye contact before sunrise thing wasn't just spiritual paranoia. Maybe it was practical. If sight was too easy to manipulate, if a sharp look could deceive, or intimidate, or sway, then maybe it was safer to begin the day with the only sense harder to fake. So you close your eyes, breathe in frankincense, dried fig, burned fennel, a hint of sweat, a hint of sea salt, and somewhere nearby, cloves. Always the cloves. It's strange how secure you feel when your nose knows what the world is made of. You walk on, never rushing, your sandals brushing the packed clay around you. The market wakes fully. The voices rise. The smells shift. The sun climbs higher and the rules of gaze, scent, and trust begin to untangle. But you'll never forget Here, in the Assyrian world, trust started in the nose. You hear him before you see him. A long, slow hiss through the teeth. Not anger, not pain, just pure, ancient annoyance. You turn the corner and there he is, Tamar, camel handler, lint-coated, barefoot, and visibly offended. Again, he mutters, dragging a rope in one hand. Again she remembers. The she in question is a camel, tall, grouchy, pink-tongued, and enormous. She's giving Tamar the look of someone who's not only read your diary, but plans to quote it in public. You freeze. The camel lifts her chin, locks eyes with you. Tamar yelps, drops the rope, and spins around. What did I say? He barks. No eye contact. Especially her. You nod, instinctively looking down. Even though the sun's fully up by now, you weren't expecting judgment from a camel before breakfast. He sighs and pats her side like she's a spoiled empress. Mira remembers everything. He explains. Once, 2 winters ago, a Babylonian merchant stared her down before dawn. Straight in the eye, she spat into his ledger. Not on it, into it. Right in the clay groove. You suppress a laugh. He's not kidding. Historians still argue. Tamar continues with a perfectly straight face. Whether camels develop memory-based hostility, or if they just dislike Babylonian cheekbones. You nod solemnly. Both could be true. He doesn't laugh. And then like a miracle, Mira kneels. With the slow-motion drama of a temple curtain dropping, she folds her legs and sinks to the ground. Tamar's face melts in relief. She forgives, he whispers, mostly to himself. For now, this isn't just superstition. Among Assyrian spice caravans, camel temper was economically relevant. These animals carried everything. Dried ginger, turmeric bricks, salt cakes, pressed pomegranate resin. A camel who refused to kneel delayed every transaction behind it. Some contracts even had a clause, subject to beast compliance. And the reasons for a camel's disobedience often pinned to pre-dawn eye contact. Caravanners told stories of entire spice trains derailed because a greenhorn stared too long at a particularly sensitive dromedary. They feel the gaze in their kidneys. One trader explained once, with such certainty it didn't even sound like a metaphor. There's a curious fringe account from a carved tablet near Kalhu that claims camels were once thought to be moon-touched beasts with one hoof in the waking world and one in the dream world. Looking them in the eye too early might cause mirrored memory, a kind of behavioral echo that left them unsettled for days. Tamar seems to believe it. He leads Mira towards the grain sacks now, carefully avoiding her gaze like a man tiptoeing past a sleeping god. The odd thing, it works. The camel follows like a charm. You trail behind, watching how other traders treat their animals. Eyes are kept low. Hands stay deliberate. One woman even whispers an apology to her donkey before adjusting its load. The animals seem calmer than the humans, but they also seem aware. You pass a group of handlers gently rubbing sandalwood oil into the flanks of their beasts, not for healing, for masking scent, to keep the animals' memories soft, their tempers low. This is more than care. It's negotiation. In the Assyrian worldview, you didn't own your beast, you bargained with it daily. And part of that bargain involved restraint, especially in the hours before full light. The story goes, if a camel likes you, you'll be fine. If it remembers you, you're doomed. One merchant even claimed his entire myrrh shipment was stolen because his led camel refused to turn left at a crossroads, supposedly as revenge for a sunrise glare a week before. He followed the animal's route anyway, right into an ambush. Should have bowed, he muttered later from his mat, half his inventory gone. You pause by the well, watching Tamar check Mira's hooves. I once saw a man kicked for smelling wrong, he says without looking up. Wrong. You echo. Changed his cologne mid-journey. Frankincense to rosewater. She hated it. You nod. Again, serious. Because here, everything you do, what you see, what you smell like, where your gaze lands feeds into the delicate social contract of the trade, and none of it is forgotten, especially not by the animals. So the next time you pass a camel before dawn, remember, don't look, don't blink. Don't smell too ambitious. The scent hits you before the warning does. Sweet, sharp, a little too floral, cinnamon, but not the kind that sings. This one whispers lies. A tall trader with a polished beard and nervous eyes walks past you holding a wrapped bundle in a blue-dyed cloth. He walks too fast, doesn't nod, doesn't breathe like a man who trusts his own product. You glance around. 3 other traders are watching him too. One from under a canopy, one from behind a cart of dried apricots, and the third from a balcony above the spice row, holding a ledger she hasn't touched in 10 minutes. They all know this is forbidden cinnamon, or at least cinnamon sold before the morning chant. And that chant, blown from a double flute and accompanied by the soft tapping of carved bone sticks, hasn't started yet, which means any sale right now would be premature. You drift closer, just enough to hear 2 shekels, the man whispers. Fine bark, straight from Phoenicia. Morning discount. The buyer, a squat man with sunburned hands, squints at the cloth but makes no move to open it. No chant, he mutters. Not yet. Just a peek? The seller says, eyes darting. No harm. Now this is dangerous. Selling. Before the dawn chant isn't just taboo, it's provocation. There's an old law, still scratched into clay somewhere near Nimrud, that states, he who unwraps the bark before the bone rhythm finishes invites fire upon his stall. Not metaphorical fire, literal. There are records. One fringe account from the outskirts of Haran tells of a trader who cracked open his bundle of Ceylon bark before the sacred flute began. By noon, his canopy was torn down, his name scraped from the trader ledger, and his face drawn upside down in the market court's shame tablet. You don't bounce back from that, not even with good cinnamon. Back in the square, the buyer holds his hands up and walks away. He doesn't even look back. The seller exhales, sweat on his brow. And then a sound, soft, rhythmic, bone against bronze. The morning chant has begun. Now it's legal. Now the day officially opens. Now eyes can meet, tongues can name, and spice can move with grace. You watch as stalls suddenly come alive. Cloths are pulled back, boxes unlocked. Fingers dipped into turmeric, into crushed rose hips, into long strands of golden saffron. It's like watching the sun bloom directly into scent. But the cinnamon trader, he's already vanished. His risk didn't pay off. Not this time. You walk past his abandoned footprints and think about the ritual boundaries that ruled this world. There's a belief still debated by scholars that cinnamon held a moral gravity among Assyrian traders. It wasn't just valuable, it was volatile, spiritually hot. Why? Maybe because it came from farthest east. Maybe because it was used in embalming rituals, and certain temples forbade it near the sick. Or maybe it was just so expensive, so easy to dilute or fake, that it demanded ceremonial discipline. Whatever the reason, cinnamon before sunrise, that was asking for curses. There's even a market myth told in whispers to apprentices that one man's shadow was cursed for unwrapping cinnamon at the wrong time. He himself remained untouched, but his shadow flickered backwards from that day on. No one knows what that means, but no one tests it either. And here's the twist. Cinnamon, for all its drama, wasn't even native to Assyria. It came by ship, across dangerous waters, through Phoenician middlemen who often diluted it, which made verifying its scent, texture, and time of sale essential. That's why the chant matters. It resets the rules. It creates a temporal border between the spiritual night and the legal day. Once the flute sounds, once the bone tapping begins, traders step into the visible world again. No more shadows, no more guesswork. And it's only after this ritual that cinnamon can safely cross hands. You watch now as a new trader unwraps a small bundle after the chant begins, and customers lean into smells. No one rushes. No one blinks. One elderly woman nods once, counts her silver rings, and purchases a strip of bark no longer than your thumb. It costs more than a week's wages, but she walks away with her eyes forward, her pace confident, because it was bought at the right time. In the right way. You step out of the square as the chant fades. The rules are active now. Everything can move freely again. Except for that one trader with the blue cloth. You'll never see him again. And if you do, he won't meet your gaze. The market has bloomed into motion now, colors swaying like prayer flags. Voices rising in that half-whispered, half-haggled harmony you only hear in cities older than maps. But the real reason you came here waits just ahead. A low stone courtyard surrounded by sandstone pillars, each carved with the shape of a closed human eye, no pupils, no lashes, just lids. Welcome to the Eye Knife Hall. You hesitate at the threshold, not because you're afraid, well, maybe a little, but because the air here feels different. Thicker, as if every molecule has been worn to behave. A young scribe in indigo robes brushes past you, carrying a tray of almond paste seals. He avoids your gaze. Everyone does here. On purpose, you step through. Inside, a group of traders sit cross-legged on reed mats, surrounding a shallow bronze basin of saffron water. No one speaks. The only sound is the slow drip of a hanging sponge water, tinted red with crushed sandalwood, tapping into the bowl with metronomic patience. You sit at the edge. A bearded man in a gold-threaded shawl glances in your direction, and then quickly turns his head to the side. This is no accident. This is the doctrine of the eye knife. Among certain Assyrian merchant sects, it was believed that a direct stare at dawn could spiritually slice open an object or a person, releasing its essence too early. A look was a blade, and sunrise made it sharper. There are records, carved meticulously into clay at Dur Sharukin, that reference the Akil Atunu, the soul's throat. Believers thought that sunrise sharpened the human gaze to the point where it could cut the spice veins of a person, causing dreams to bleed out into the waking world. And nowhere was this more feared than in the spice trade, because spices were essence, and essence once released couldn't be returned. That's why, until the eye knife chant was completed, a slow, breathy chorus sung only by women past childbearing age, for reasons still debated by scholars. Most high-value spices were covered, blessed, and not stared at directly. You peer closer into the saffron water. Reflections shimmer across it, but distorted. No faces, just gold light, curved like fish bones. A whisper reaches your ear. Don't lean in too far. You straighten. A trader beside you, face veiled in mesh, gestures once, hand to heart, then down to knee. A blessing. You return it. Then the elder speaks, voice soft, shaped like smoke. There was once a man, she says, who stared at a box of cloves before the chant. Everyone listens. The box never opened. Not once. But that night, his wife burned his bedding and swore the spices were dreaming through his skin. You blink, unsure if it's metaphor. You hope it is. According to fringe sources, especially from the trade ports near Alalach, certain sects believe the eye knife could be used intentionally, to bless or to wound. A trader might fix his gaze upon a competitor's shipment, just as the sun broke the clouds, whisper a silent insult, and leave. Days later, mold, cracks, rats. Was it sabotage? Maybe, but the courts never punished eye-gazing. They couldn't prove it. And that made it all the more powerful. Some even wore copper-tinted glass over their eyes during dawn hours. Primitive sunglasses not to protect their vision, but to shield others from the sharpness of their stare. You glance at the elder. Her veil is speckled with myrrh dust. Her lips move, barely, as she repeats the old refrain, "A blade from the sun may cut the soul. Close your lids if you cannot close your heart." Then, as the final syllable fades, she nods. The others rise, slowly, still not looking at one another. It's over. The eye knife hour has passed. The doctrine has been observed. And you walk out of the courtyard feeling like your gaze weighs more than before, as if each blink might spark something, slice something, stir something. Now, outside, you see the traders again. Their faces are uncovered. Their eyes finally meet. But you still catch a few who flinch, who glance sideways, who'd rather not risk it, just in case. Because even if it's only myth, even if it's only metaphor, eyes can still feel sharp in the wrong kind of morning. You're back in the alley behind the main spice stalls now, where the stones are slick with oil runoff and the sunlight barely touches the ground. This is the gray zone, where things are bought in whispers and sold in shadows. A man gestures you forward with 2 fingers, barely lifting his hand from under a linen robe. He doesn't smile, doesn't blink, just tilts his head toward a slanted wooden door behind him. Where the scent of cloves is thick enough to chew, you duck inside. The room's dim, cool, and padded with old grain sacks. A single window is covered with goat leather, filtering light like an amber lens. 4 men sit in a semicircle, none of them look up. This is a clove handoff, and you're right on time. One of them reaches into his satchel and pulls out a bundle, carefully wrapped, marked with a red ink glyph that means blessed after second crow. But no one says a word. Not yet. Because even now, especially now, eye contact is forbidden. The smugglers who work this trade believe that meeting eyes during the transfer disturbs the spiritual balance of the spice, something about heat passing between glances, disrupting the dry harmony cloves are supposed to hold. Fringe logic. Sure, but cloves are temperamental. Even modern scholars admit clove oil loses potency when exposed to too much lighter body heat. So maybe this superstition began with basic observation and snowballed into a coded ritual. Either way, you keep your eyes low. The bundle passes to the buyer. He nods downward, not toward anyone, and counts out coins using a system of clicks and taps. 3 against the box lid. 2 on the stone floor, a rhythm that replaces speech. No eyes, no words, just trust. You learn that this is how smuggling works in Assyria, not just in the shadows, but in silence. In gazes, carefully avoided. There's even a saying in Akkadian, the loudest lie is spoken with the eyes. And smuggling cloves, that's dangerous business. Cloves were taxed, rationed, and considered a royal spice, often used in embalming rituals or high temple ceremonies. Selling them without permit could mean exile, or worse, public unflavoring. That's when they burn your spice stock in front of you. No death, just economic humiliation. So the smugglers adapted, and their first rule, averted eyes. One story, carved in haste into a small bone tablet near Arbela, describes a deal gone wrong. A young smuggler met the eyes of his buyer too early. The buyer, nervous and sweating, was spotted by a temple warden. When asked what he was doing, he panicked and said, "Just admiring the spice." The warden replied, "You don't admire what you haven't seen." Both men were fined. Their cloves were burned. The bone tablet ends with, "And from then, they blinked less." You watch now as the smuggler tucks the coins away. The deal's done. No one moves until the buyer steps out. Then, with the precision of synchronized fish, they all stand and leave through different exits. Not a single word exchanged. You step out last. The sun is higher now, its heat bouncing off the stone walls. You pass a few temple guards, their robes trailing like spilled ink across the dust. One gives you a long look. You lower your eyes, not out of guilt, but because it's custom. And maybe, just maybe, you've started to believe a little that there is something sacred in not looking. That trade isn't just about price, it's about timing, trust, and tension. And that sometimes a glance is louder than a lie. Back in the market square, everything is louder now, but you carry silence in your pocket, like a spice wrapped in cloth. Still warm, still dangerous. The Salt District wakes differently, not with the perfume of cloves or the gold dust hush of saffron, but with weight-heavy clay slabs, stacked and crusted with time. Salt is not beautiful. Salt is not mysterious. Salt is survival. But even here, in the most practical part of Nineveh's morning trade, the gaze still matters. You watch as 2 elders squat across from one another, a massive slab of sun-baked salt between them. It gleams under the morning light like a frozen riverbed. No one touches it yet. No one looks the other in the eye. Instead, they each pull a pinch of crushed salt from their waist pouches and lay it on opposite corners of the slab. This is a salted oath, a sacred gesture in Assyrian trade law. It seals intention. It replaces paperwork, but it only works under specific conditions. No words may be spoken until both piles are down. No eye contact can occur until the salt absorbs sunlight. No deal is valid if the buyer's shadow crosses the slab. You watch all of this happen with choreographed grace. These are men who've done this dance for 50 years. Once the light hits the salt just right, the buyer nods. The seller nods. Still no words. Still no stares. Just the faint crunch as the slab is scraped gently with a bronze chisel, separating a portion for the deal. Trade complete. No drama. No witnesses needed. That's the power of the gaze-free deal. A form of commerce built not on trust, but on restraint. The idea being, if I cannot look at you and still honor the terms, then the deal is twice as strong. There's even a fringe belief etched into a broken ceramic bowl found in Asher that the gods themselves refuse to witness trade made through eye contact. Supposedly, they found it too emotional. And in the Salt District, where margins are tight and tempers are tighter, that emotion can ruin everything. You stroll past rows of salt cakes stacked in pyramids, some dyed blue from lapis dust, others pressed with tiny cuneiform stamps denoting region, origin, or purity. One woman calls out to a customer using a wooden clapper, not her voice. The man approaches, eyes down, and inspects her wares. When he chooses, he touches a single cake, then lays down a bronze ring. She nods. They part. No one smiles. Because here's the truth, no one tells you eye contact is a luxury. It's for later, for leisure, for storytelling. Not for this. Not for two traders in the dust at dawn trying to feed 12 mouths with a crumbling slab of rock. Historians still debate whether this gaze aversion culture emerged from religion, trauma, or economics. Some argue it was a way to flatten hierarchy. No glances, no intimidation. Others say it evolved from older temple rituals where initiates had to bow their eyes to preserve the sacred hierarchy. But here in the Salt Quarter, it feels simpler, like a shield, a quiet mutual agreement. Let's get this done without waking the part of us that wants to fight. You stop near a younger trader now. He fumbles the ritual, speaks too soon. The older man across from him stiffens. No words, no anger, just a long pause, and then a slow retreat. Deal canceled. The younger man looks shaken. A missed transaction in this economy. That stings harder than salt in a cracked heel. You move on, past a child dusting salt cakes with a palm fan, past a cart creaking under the weight of brined goat skins, past a shrine with an offering of dried fish, and a tiny mirror facing downward because even reflections can be intrusive here. And then you see it. Two men seated under a fraying canopy, facing each other. No salt, no spice, just silence. They are not trading goods. They're negotiating a favor, something more delicate. Maybe permission to borrow a donkey, maybe protection through a rival district, maybe something heavier, but they do not meet eyes. Instead, they use hand gestures, long pauses, shared breath. When the deal is struck, they each touch the center of their own forehead, then tap the ground between them. The message is clear. I give you my path, but not my soul. And again, no eye contact. You realize something as you leave the Salt District. It's not about fear. It's not even about mysticism. It's about boundaries. Not everything needs to be seen to be understood. Not every deal needs to be witnessed to be true. Sometimes, the most sacred thing you can do is look away. A scream echoes down the East Alley short, startled, then clipped. Not fear, not pain. It's the high-pitched, frustrated kind you only hear when cumin spoils and both parties swear it wasn't their fault. You pivot toward the sound, already knowing where it's headed. The Trader's Court, a small rectangular yard ringed with bleached stone benches, flanked on one end by a platform for disputes, and on the other by an elevated perch used solely for holding Saffron as legal tribute. Yes, Saffron, because in this particular court, you don't pay fines in coin. You pay in doses of grief, and nothing stings like giving up Saffron. You arrive just in time to see the two men being led to the center. One is tall, broad-shouldered, his hands dusted with turmeric. The other is wiry and twitching, probably a sesame oil merchant by the smell of his tunic. They do not speak. They do something far stranger. They sit, knees touching, faces inches apart, and begin a staring duel. No, you didn't miss here. A staring duel. Welcome to one of the oldest forms of non-violent resolution in the Assyrian merchant world. A pre-dawn ritual turned semi-official dispute practice, once used to determine fault when evidence failed. The rules are simple. Both parties must sit before the central saffron dish. No blinking for the duration of the sun's edge rising across the westernmost court wall. First to blink pays, but there's a catch. If both parties blink within the same heartbeat, the watcher, a neutral scribe, declares a mistrial, and both are fined. Double the logic. If neither man could hold conviction behind his gaze, Both must have lied a little. You take a seat with the crowd. No cheering, no betting, just solemn silence, broken only by the faint grinding of someone preparing an apology. Bouquet coriander leaves and wet lime peel. The watcher enters, robes stiff with blue ink. He sets the saffron dish down, opens a wax tablet, and intones, claim, spoiled cumin. Trader Adamu accuses Trader Belu of sand mixing. Trader Belu counters with a charge of poor seal integrity. Murmurs ripple. Sand mixing is serious. But a broken seal, that's personal. The duel begins. Both men lock eyes. No blinking, no twitching. You can feel the air still. Even the flies seem to wait. Seconds pass. Then a minute. Then another. The sun crawls higher, dragging its golden thread across the wall. Traders begin to squirm. You feel your own eyes start to water just watching. And then Belu blinks, sharp, obvious, unmistakable. The watcher strikes the dish with a bronze stick. One ting, final. Belu, faulted, fine. 3 pinches of saffron, to be rendered at next harvest. Belu slumps, silent, no argument. His assistant begins pulling scrolls to prepare the transfer, but the lesson hangs heavier than the verdict. Because this wasn't just about cumin, this was about control, about the power of gaze, the weapon of will. Historians still argue whether these duels were fair or performative, whether blinking truly reflected guilt, or just dry eyes and bad luck. Some say it was a form of ritualized shame avoidance. Others believe it was rooted in ancient priestly practices, where prolonged eye contact was a spiritual interrogation. You rise from the bench slowly. The crowd disperses like dandelion fluff, drifting back to their stalls. At the base of the wall, the saffron glows in its shallow dish. 3 pinches, enough to stain 10 veils or bless a newborn's name, all because someone blinked. You think back to the man who once said, "Look me in the eye and swear." And now you understand why most Assyrian traders would never say that. Because looking in the eye wasn't about honesty, it was about dominance, about daring someone to flinch under the weight of daylight, about pinning their breath between your stare and their guilt. So next time someone accuses you before breakfast, maybe just keep your eyes to yourself. You leave the trader's court just as a temple bell tolls once long and low, like the sky clearing its throat. That sound isn't just ceremonial, it signals a sacred shift. The cats are on the move. Yes, cats. And no, they're not pets. Not really. These are temple cats, sleek and bone-thin, draped in charm thread collars and cloaked in mystery. You spot one now, gliding along the spice row with the posture of a priest and the face of a god who's just barely tolerating you. It weaves between baskets of sumac, hops lightly over a tangle of rope, and vanishes under a stall like a whisper with fur. These cats weren't just admired, they were obeyed. In certain parts of Assyrian Nineveh, cats determined where spice could or could not be sold before full daylight. That sounds absurd. Until you remember the rule: no eye contact before sunrise. And what better guardian of liminal vision than a creature who never blinks unless it chooses to? You follow one now, a dusty calico with a crooked tail. She pauses at a 3-way intersection between cumin, sesame, and incense. She sniffs the air, arches her back, then pads north. Instantly, 3 traders fold their canopies. No words, no questions. They just shut down and move elsewhere. The cats have spoken. It was called Path of the Eyelid, and it was recorded in soft ink on linen scrolls kept in temple side chambers. These scrolls referred to by scholars as the whiskered laws, tracked feline routes, preferred stalls, and zones of quiet trust. Why? Because cats didn't break the gaze rules. They moved in shadow. They watched without being watched. They went exactly where the wind whispered, and the wind, as it happens, tends to know everything. One particularly curious law from Asher reads, if a cat rests where 2 traders meet, neither may sell until the sun touches her paws. And no one risked it. Not because the law was enforced, but because it had never been broken without consequence. One fringe tale tells of a lemon merchant who ignored the cat's posture and opened early. By midday, his lemons had fermented in their own juice, not spoiled, bubbled. The next day, he offered milk to every cat in the quarter. They accepted. His trade recovered. Coincidence or penance? Historians still argue whether it was biology or feline justice. You reach the base of a low platform where an elderly man sits cross-legged, sketching maps, not of cities, not of stars, but of cat paths. He marks them in concentric loops and dashed lines. Routes that pass near shrines, avoid sacred wells, and always end near open water. You watch as he dips his reed pen into ochre and traces a curved line past the ginger stall. Tomorrow, he murmurs, without looking up, that path will close. How do you know? You ask. He finally looks up and you're startled by the clarity in his eyes, like polished amber. Because she looked through me this morning, he says, not at me. You don't ask for further explanation. It wouldn't help. Instead, you sit nearby and watch as the sun continues its slow climb. Cats appear and vanish like smoke. Traders shift their stalls based on nothing but whiskers and tail flicks. And it works. No conflicts, no spoilage, no broken gaze laws. Because when vision was risky, when glances could curse or mislead, people turned to the only creature that saw without accusation, the cat. Even now, one rests atop a crate of cardamom. She watches you with that half-lidded gaze that feels ancient and unfair. And you bow your head, just a little, not out of superstition, out of respect. Because in a world ruled by who looks at whom and when some eyes have seen enough to no longer care, the sun climbs higher, now brighter, sharper, bold enough to catch on every copper hinge and dust-flecked glass bead in the market. You shield your eyes, not because of the heat, but because someone just flashed a mirror, not by accident. A polished copper plate, angled low, catches the light and throws it sideways just enough to startle a nearby trader into looking up. Too quickly, too soon. And that's the danger of the desert mirror game. You find yourself near a caravan that's stalled just outside the spice perimeter. Its guards wear lacquered belts and sun-scorched turbans. Their faces are drawn and impatient, and several of them carry signaling mirrors, round discs of polished bronze or copper, mounted on handles wrapped with twine. Originally, they were meant for long-distance communication across dunes. 1 blink of light to signal all clear, 2 for threat, 3 for prepare to lie. But lately, they've been repurposed as tools of sabotage. You inch closer to a group of merchants hunched over bundles of thyme and dried hibiscus. One suddenly jolts, curses, and stands up too fast. His gaze accidentally meets the courier across from him. "Your boy flashed me," he shouts. "Don't pretend it was sunplay." The other merchant just shrugs. "Your eyes should have been down, cousin." And just like that, the transaction sours. Here in Nineveh, reflecting a gaze indirectly was just as bad as catching it directly, maybe worse. It was manipulative, a weaponized glance. There's a wedge-shaped tablet from the city's western court that describes a feud between 2 sandalwood exporters who used mirrors to accuse one another of forced vision. Forced vision. Imagine that. A legal term for making someone look the judgment. Both find equal weight in rosewater. The court ruled, for what has been seen cannot be unseen, and who sees first does not always win. You keep moving, now wary of flashes. There's an entire fringe school of thought still cited in clay fragments found near Saipar that claimed these early mirror tricks were the origin of misread omens. That a reflected glance, caught too early or aimed too low, could be mistaken for a divine sign. And in the spice world, signs mattered. One twitch of muscle at the wrong moment. A buyer might walk away. One glimpse of panic in the eye of a cardamom seller. Price drops by half. Some traders even wore veils not for modesty but to scatter reflections. Thin mesh that let in light but didn't give anything back. Because in Assyria, to reflect light was to reflect intent, and intent, once seen, could no longer be hidden. You reach a small stone alcove where a row of broken mirrors hangs like wind chimes. They clink in the breeze, slightly tarnished, warped with age. A warning, or maybe a confession. A boy nearby sells cracked fragments for a single copper bead. What are these for? You ask. He shrugs. Some say they break curses. Others use them to spy. Do you believe that? He narrows his eyes at you and says, "I believe people see what they fear." Then he spits into the sand and walks away. Back in the main corridor, a flash of silver catches your eye again. But this time, you don't react. You keep your gaze steady, low, safe. because this is how the mirror feuds begin. Not with malice, but with misunderstanding, with light bouncing where it shouldn't, with a blink that meant nothing but cost everything. One last fact to remember. A document carved into ivory, recovered from the ruins of a trade house, describes a failed pepper shipment blamed entirely on sunfire between carts. The interpreter's note added, somewhat bitterly, they were looking for shade, they found judgment. So here's your rule for this hour of the day. Don't trust the light. Don't assume a glance was meant kindly. And if you must reflect something, make sure it's not your guilt. You follow the alley as it narrows into a crease between crumbling walls barely wide enough for a wheelbarrow, but thick with the scent of mint stems, dried sweat, and sand. Not just any sand. This sand has been prepared. Ahead, you see them. 3 traders crouched on low stools, faces turned toward the rising light, carefully dipping their fingers into small clay bowls filled with fine, pale grit. Welcome to the sand eye wash ritual. You're not hallucinating. This is real, this is old, and this is sacred. Before the day's major negotiations, particularly between rivals or distant trade partners, it was common practice for spice brokers to ritually dull their sight on purpose with a light dusting of sand across the eyelids. The logic: too much clarity could kill a deal. Clarity brought pride. Pride brought conflict. And conflict, in the world of high-stakes, saffron and black mustard seeds, often ended with someone crying into their dried apricots. So they blurred themselves, softened their gaze. Historians still argue whether this ritual was rooted in mysticism or if it was simply practical psychology. Did the slight irritation reduce overconfidence? Did it slow reactions? Did it simply make you blink more often and therefore seem more honest? You sit beside them. One offers you a bowl. You hesitate. It looks like ordinary sand, pale, cool, but there's something floral under it. Rose ash, maybe, or crushed myrrh root. You dip 2 fingers, bring it to your eyes. Gently, the grains dust across your lids, and instantly, everything becomes just a little hazy. Not blinding, just softened. The world turns quiet. Shapes are still shapes. Faces are still faces. But edges blur, and your mind begins to listen more than it looks. The trader beside you begins humming a simple 3-note rhythm, nothing elaborate. Just enough to steady breath, to mark the shift from vision to intuition. Because in this moment, it's not about what you see. It's about what you feel when you can't see perfectly. This ritual wasn't done everywhere, just in specific city quarters, mostly among old guard traders who believed that ego entered through the eyes. If you dulled them, you dulled the self. There's an etched shell fragment in the Nineveh archive that reads, "To see with the soul. First, close the lashes with dust." You sit in stillness now, half-lidded, watching the traders slowly rise. No one makes eye contact. But this time, not out of fear, out of respect. You've all stepped into a liminal pact. One man lights a pinch of sage. The smoke curls over your shoulder, fragrant and clean. Another presses a thumb to your temple, murmurs a word in a dialect you don't know, and walks away. The transaction begins. Quiet negotiations. Palms open, facing the sky, heads tilted, voices low. You can't follow the details, but you sense agreement. You sense that truth has weight here, and you know, deep in your sand-dulled bones, that nothing will be written down. Because this isn't about proof. This is about presence. In another fringe account, a trader claimed his best deal ever. An 8-donkey shipment of indigo resin was struck during one of these rituals, sealed with nothing but a hand on his knee and a nod toward a burning sandalwood stick. No eyes met. No ink touched clay. But both men honored it to their deaths, because they couldn't see each other clearly. So they had to trust the blur. You open your eyes slowly. The sun is brighter now. The sand itches a little, but you don't wipe it away. Not yet. You want to carry this feeling a little longer, of walking a market where sight is softened, where deals depend not on sharp stares, but on the slow, quiet gravity of knowing beneath words, beneath posture what someone means. And in a world where vision could curse or bless, There was wisdom in the blur. You've wandered beyond the central market now, past the shaded arches and temple-scented courtyards, toward the narrowest edge of Nineveh's southern wall, where noise thins and tension thickens. Here, behind a crumbling guard post and an abandoned incense kiln, a different kind of trade occurs. One made not with words, not even with hands, but with blinks. You're in the territory of the blink code. Two figures sit on opposite ends of a low stone bench, both facing the same wall. They appear to be doing nothing. Their hands are still. Their robes blend with the dust, but you know better now. One of them blinks twice. Slow, the other waits, then responds. 3 short blinks, 1 long. A pause. You've just witnessed the beginning of a silent negotiation, the blink code, as it's called in a few fragmented Assyrian wax tablets, was developed for spice espionage and covert deals, a private language of eye motions, trained into apprentices over years, used in situations where open communication meant danger. Why? Because spoken secrets could be overheard, written ones intercepted, but a blink, a twitch, a controlled flutter of the eyelid, that vanished in an instant. To master the code was to move weight without record. Some believed it was created by desert smugglers trying to dodge temple taxes. Others say it was first taught by blind scribes who had memorized the rhythms but never saw them performed. Historians still debate which is true. You crouch behind a stack of cracked amphorae and watch. 3 blinks. Pause. 1 blink. Long stare. 2 quick. That likely means change of location. A nod. Pause. 1 blink. That's... Yes, the rhythm is hypnotic, like a dance with the eyelids. No muscle wasted, no word spoken. The blink code wasn't universal. Each trader group had their own dialect. The Nineveh traders used blinks, but the desert border guards added eye angle shifts, right for time, left for wait. There's even a clay shard that shows pupils drawn in different positions to mark danger, safe passage, and watch the goat. Some messages could only be read if both parties had matched eye color. That one's probably folklore. Probably. You inch closer and hear a whispered breath. Just 1 word. Tamarisk. That's the name of a shipment. Or a location. Maybe both. Then one of the traders rises, throws his shawl over his shoulder, and walks away. The other remains, staring into the empty alley as if still receiving messages. You approach him slowly, cautiously. He doesn't turn his head. He just speaks. You saw nothing. You don't respond. He blinks once. Slowly, his tone softens. Good. You learn. This was the cardinal rule of blink dealing. The less seen, the safer the spice. It wasn't just for show. There were lives at stake. One Assyrian record tells of a trader who blinked the wrong code in front of a rival guild, meant to say hold shipment, but accidentally signaled burn shipment. And they did. To the last strand. You retreat now, shoes silent on the powdery ground, and step back into the shadow of the wall. You feel your own eyelids twitch, not from fatigue but from possibility. Because in a city obsessed with vision and its dangers, sometimes the smallest, fastest flicker of light carried more weight than a page full of ink. And the quietest spies weren't those who whispered. They were the ones who never had to speak at all. The air smells different now. Less of spice, more of stone, less bustle, more breath. You've drifted toward the funerary quarter where sound slows, footsteps soften, and even the pigeons seem to coo in a lower octave. This isn't where deals are struck. It's where they end. Here, just outside the Temple of Asher's western gate, the traders' paths do something rare. They intersect, not with camels or copper, not with turmeric or thyme, but with gaze. Because in death, and only in death, eye contact becomes sacred. A narrow procession moves past you now, 4 figures dressed in pale linen, carrying a small wooden box draped in dyed goat hide. The scent rising from it is unmistakable. Clove, crushed mint, a trace of dried pomegranate. It's not a body, it's a spice bundle, a farewell batch, used for tribute or for closure, sometimes both. The one leading the procession is older, draped in blue with ash smudged on the brow. They turn slightly as they pass and meet your eyes. Direct, unblinking, no flinch. You feel it, a hush. Not fear, but gravity. The weight of a loud gaze. This moment of this ritual is one of the few spaces in Assyrian society where locking eyes before sunrise was not only acceptable, but required, because in the world of spice and silence, death was the only thing more honest than scent. Historians still argue whether this tradition emerged from temple funerary rites or from older merchant myths, where it was believed that a soul wouldn't settle unless someone met its departing gaze. There's a tablet fragment from Eridu that reads, "What leaves with no witness will wander." And so they stared one final time, one full gaze, no blinking. You follow the procession now through a grove of tamarisk trees. The branches here are hung with bits of dyed thread, prayer tags, and small pieces of obsidian, trade tokens from past lives, left as parting gestures. You pass a quiet stone platform flat, empty, except for a single-seated figure, a spice elder, motionless, eyes open, waiting. Because in this corner of Nineveh, there's one final ceremony reserved only for the last trade. When a merchant dies, their most loyal rival, or sometimes their most loyal customer, is invited to sit before the box and meet it directly, to look into the symbol of their trade, to acknowledge their end, to offer a gaze free of price, strategy, or judgment. It's called the final glance. You sit beside the elder now, still unsure if you're witnessing a performance or participating. The procession stops. The box is placed down gently between you. The air seems to hold its breath. The elder nods, just once, then lifts her eyes and stares, not at you, not at the others, at the box, at what remains of someone's work, their travel, their trust, their saffron-soaked ledgers and their star-scored camels, and the little song they used to hum while measuring cumin by moonlight. The look is long. The look is everything. Then she blinks. A single tear follows. She bows her head. The ritual is complete. One of the younger assistants steps forward and offers you a clove, not to trade, not to sell, to carry. As witness, you tuck it into your pouch beside the stone you found earlier. It feels heavier than it should. And as you walk away from the grove, back toward the noisy city, you realize something. The rules of sight weren't meant to punish. They were meant to protect, to hold back the flood of meaning until it could be met with full attention. To make this moment this clear, final look feel like truth. In Assyria, most things began with averted eyes, but everything ended with one last, steady stare. The shadows are long now, not sharp, like the dawn's blades, but soft-edged, like memory. You've returned to the main square. The spice stalls are thinning. The saffron has been packed, the cumin covered. Only a few merchants linger, mostly older ones who prefer to close the day slowly, like folding a blanket corner by corner. But something is different, something rare. People are looking at each other freely, directly, and not just glancing, seeing. A ginger seller waves across the square to his rival. A courier and a honey trader laugh and clasp hands. A woman pulls her veil back to smile. Not in flirtation, but in recognition. Because in Assyria, there was one time when eye contact wasn't a threat, or a risk, or a ritual to be followed like a recipe. There was one time when it was a gift. At twilight, after the last transaction, after the final mint leaf has dried, and the camels are tied down, and the incense has lost its urgency, that's when the gaze returns. You sit beneath a worn fig tree near the edge of the square. Its bark is carved with old initials and spice symbols, half ledger, half love letter. Beside you, two apprentices whisper gossip. "Did you see Belu blink this morning?" "Of course I did. That's why his cumin went dusty." Dusty cumin's not as bad as a crooked sandal. They burst into giggles. You smile, eyes still half-lidded from the dust ritual hours ago. Across the square, you spot a man you bartered with at dawn. Back then, you only nodded. Barely noticed his face. Now, his eyes meet yours. He nods again. This time, slower, acknowledging the day, not just the deal. You wonder, was this what all the aversion was for? To make this moment matter more. There's a carved proverb above one of the closed stalls. You hadn't seen it before. Faded but legible. He who looks first risks the day. He who looks last owns the night. The meaning sinks in slowly, like ink into parchment. In a society that held gaze like fire capable of warmth or ruin, the true luxury wasn't being seen. It was being seen safely. The sun slides behind the rooftops now, and the market exhales. You notice a woman sweeping fennel dust into neat little spirals. She pauses, locks eyes with a passing boy, and gives a smile that says no harm today. He returns it. All around, eyes rise. The people re-emerge from behind the rules, not because the danger has passed, but because, for now, trust outweighs risk. And just like that, today's final trade is complete. No coin, no spice. Just a gaze, freely given. You walk slowly through the archway that leads back towards your resting place. Your pouch is heavier now, not with goods, but with stories. Sand dust in your lashes, clove in your pocket. The memory of a cat's indifferent stare still warming your spine. You don't rush. No one does at twilight, because twilight belongs to the eyelids raised, to deals that don't need ink, to truths that don't need words, to people who looked away all day just to look at you now, without fear. And when you pass that final fountain at the edge of the square, you catch your reflection in the water, soft, blurry, almost unreal, but your eyes are open. And for the first time today, so is everyone else's. So now, as you settle deeper into your pillow, eyes fluttering toward their own slow twilight, let's leave the market behind. The sounds dim, the colors fade, the air, once heavy with spice and sunlight, begins to cool. The rules of the day, no gaze, no glance, no open trust, have melted into something gentler, a shared silence. A promise that tomorrow will begin again, quiet and strange and sacred. Imagine the clove in your pocket still warm from the sun. Imagine the cat curled beside the saffron stall. Imagine the way the traders bowed their heads, not out of shame, but in reverence for privacy, for caution, for the dance of timing. You don't need to see everything to know what matters. You don't have to be watched to be valued. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can offer is the quiet dignity of a gaze saved for just the right moment. So let it go. Let the mirrors dull. Let the markets sleep. Let your thoughts soften like incense smoke trailing into dusk. And in this twilight of your own, know this: you walked through a world that ran on shadows and silence, and you understood it. You moved without blinking. You listened without staring. And you were seen. At last, when it mattered most. So close your eyes now, gently, just once. And let the rest, like the clove, the camel, the sand, and the gaze settle into stillness. You're safe here. You're done for today. And the sun will rise again. Without needing your permission,